Good afternoon, everyone. And this is another episode in Something to Talk About. Today, the topic that we're going to be covering is aging, specifically for women, but I'm sure that there are some aspects of what you're going to hear today that are going to apply to men as well. My guest today is a good friend of mine, and I say that with all sincerity. Her name is Linda Radford, and Linda and I have known each other for decades, literally decades. She has children that are not even young adults now who have children. And I knew her when both of her babies were literally that, babies. Linda and I both worked for a computer company a long time ago, and she was in management, and I was in management as well in a support function. You all know that my background is in HR. And so I supported her sales organization. She was a district sales manager and responsible for a large portion of the federal government sales for that computer company. She went on to continue to be in sales management at various other entities. And a few years ago, and I'm going to let her talk about that, a few years ago, she retired. We lived in the Washington, D.C. area, but at the time of her retirement, she made a decision to move to a senior compound complex unit, a little bit of a distance away from where we were, not a large amount, maybe another 30 some miles. And but we stayed in touch. We've been a part of a book club together. We've just been good friends, and she is one of the people in my life. I don't have a lot of them, but she's one of the people that when I need to do a gut check, pick up the phone and I call Linda. And she knows that means she's going to be on the phone with me for hours while she provides a heavy dose of therapy so that I can make it through the next couple of months without too much interference in her life. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to my close friend, Linda Radford. Good afternoon, Linda.
Hi there. I'm surprised I didn't know I was doing therapy. It was my therapy too.
You had to know you were doing therapy because nobody talks for 5-6 hours until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And finally somebody says, "Are you getting sleepy? Maybe we should get off the phone." But no.
I did it pretty willingly.
Well, I appreciate it. One of the things that I thought we'd start with this whole thing of aging is you and I have talked about how, at least for me, it's been a bit of an adjustment, just trying to figure out how I get my bearings. So have you experienced any of that?
So I don't think I'm unique, but when I was ready to retire, I was just ready. That's all I can say. I had done a full career and things were getting to the point that I just didn't want to do it anymore, to be honest with you. It's not that I didn't want to do anything. I just didn't want to play that game anymore. I wasn't loving my job, and I had always loved my jobs.
Okay.
So I just felt it was time for me. And I don't think I ever really thought about it being a regret. I knew it would be a change, but let's face it, in the career that I was in, technology, change is a constant.
Right.
So for me, it was one more change in life. And I just accepted it at that and kind of tried to create my own excitement about it. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I knew I had to do it.
Okay, so once you made the decision that it was time for you to do it, that you wanted to kind of get off that wheel of business, how did you said you knew it was going to be change. And I know personally that you planned parts of that. So how
Right.
did you, okay, once you'd made the decision that you knew you'd be entering, let's call it the third chapter of your life, how did you prepare for that? How did you plan for that? You said that you thought about it and you knew it was going to be changed, and then what happened then?
Mm. Well, to be somewhat succinct about it, I knew that I could not afford to continue to live in Arlington and live the kind of life that I wanted to. And that's for many reasons. Some of it financial, but the other part of it is even though I had friends close by, a lot of my neighbors that I had been very close with had also retired and moved away. So from a community standpoint, I was ready to make a change. And then from a financial standpoint, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't house poor and not able to retire because I needed to live someplace that just wasn't going to accommodate the savings and income I thought I would get. So, and if I was going to move, I'm being very selfish about this, I wanted a new house. So I started at first just looking at new home communities
Okay.
outside of the metro area. And the more I looked at that, I realized there were these active adult or 55 plus communities, and they offered lots of amenities. And I also had friends like we know Anne, who moved to Florida to the villages, and I wasn't moving to Florida. But that kind of environment was appealing because I planned to stay active in my life, and I didn't want to work so hard at having to remain active. So when I found this community, it popped up to the top of the list because it was within 50 miles of DC, and it had a lot of folks that were involved in the arts here. And that I knew would appeal to Bill, my husband, because he, unlike me, was very wed to the Washington area.
Okay.
So he's 4 years my junior, so he wasn't ready to retire. And that means that he needed to have ready access and things like that. So all those things kind of had to be put into a package that made it viable for both of us, really. But I was pretty intent on the fact that I was not going back to work. So we had to do something.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And that's where I took off.
When you talk about, you and I have talked about the fact that I'm kind of in a different headset. I'm single and not
Yep.
married. And so trying to map out a strategy for me in terms of what retirement could, should, would look like is slightly a different chore. While I don't have anybody else's um, needs to consider, my situation looks very different than yours. And so when you talk about you wanted to stay active, I know that where the complex you moved to offers a lot of social opportunities. There's, social events that you all have. There, card playing and arts and crafts and trips and that kind of thing.
Yep.
Other than the activities that are part of your planned community, were there any other challenges that you've found yourself surprisingly having to consider and navigate?
Well, obviously, leaving friends that I wouldn't see as often is a challenge. I mean, and you're having to go to a new area and meet all new friends. Everything's new. So some people that will hold them back from making a change. I had to get myself into a headset that said, it's a new adventure. And financially, I had been through some things in my life, doesn't matter what really, but financially, I didn't have any financial advisor saying, oh yeah, you can retire now. So I had to make sure that budget-wise, things worked for me. That required moving out of the area. So maybe I just looked at it from the perspective of, it's inevitable. I have to change. And I just took it for what it was. But no, I don't think Annette, a mutual friend of ours, has asked this question a couple times. I just had it in my head that it was time. And I figured also, when it came to living in a community like this, although I had to coerce Bill, my whole family actually, they were all, you can't move. You can't, this is ridiculous. You're in a brick house up here and you're going to go buy a new construction and they never hold up and blah, blah, blah. So, there was a lot of discontent in my family with the move. So maybe the hardest thing was convincing them that this was not only possible, but could be enjoyable. And I think they all got over that in different stages. Now Bill is getting ready to really retire. So he's just now really starting to engage in some of the things that I fell in love with right up front. But he would be the one that probably tells you more regrets than I had. And I also, when I moved here, I figured if something happened to one of us, there's kind of a built-in support system around us.
Yeah, because it's more of a community than a neighborhood.
It's very much more a community than a neighborhood. And although, communities and neighborhoods both have their drawbacks,
right?
There are many, many, many people here that are supportive. And I didn't even really know about this, although some people have said they moved down here because of it. We actually have a 501c3 made up of residents from this very community called Helping Hands. When people, as we will when we age, start to have challenges, whether that's I'm a woman alone and I don't know how to change my air filter, or I can't get up on the ladder anymore and change the batteries in my smoke alarm, or I need a ride to the doctor because I can't drive anymore. The people involved in this organization come do those things for you free of charge.
Wow.
Wow. It's truly a blessing. And so I guess I say to people that are thinking about getting into retirement, here's how I look at it. You're on the downhill slope of life. I personally want to go out happy. And I want to go out being of value. So whatever those things are for you, make a list of them. And then decide, do I have to move? If I do move, what are the things I want? And what support systems do I need to have in place? So hopefully, and that's across your fingers, this is the last move that I have to make. So that's kind of how I looked at it. And it's worked out well. I mean, I just started getting engaged in little things, like you said, there's some neighbors that play cards together, so we'll play cards. And then because it got bigger and bigger and more people wanted to play, we started a club. And so now there's a club of people that play cards. And then I got involved in a lot of social activities. Next thing I know, I'm on the social committee, arranging the events. And now I'm the chair of the social committee. So it can kind of blow up. And now you're back at work. But I'm back at work doing something I enjoy.
Yes. Let me ask you, one of the other things that I've discussed with a number of friends of mine, and we're all kind of contemporaries, is this notion of we all had a tribe made up of however many people, but a tribe that has gotten you through most of your adulthood. Usually it consisted of family members, maybe parents, siblings, as well as professional colleagues and social friends from school, or however you collect your tribal members. I have noticed personally that as I've gotten older, the tribe is dwindling for obvious reasons. People are going on. And so when you're looking around for someone to talk to about X, whatever X is, your go-to people may not still be here. How have you dealt with that? First of all, should I ask you, have you experienced any of that? I know the answer, but.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think we've all experienced it to greater or lesser degrees. I do spend a lot of time still talking, even though we can't be together, with people like yourself and the Wang ladies, the women from Wang that we worked with.
Right.
We go out of our way still to try to do an annual get together. Now, not as many of us can make the travel anymore. So we do quarterly Zooms. It takes a lot of work to do that. And then again, this change has given me an opportunity to meet new people, and honestly, some younger people, because it is a 55 plus community. And as I try to tell some of the older folks here, when we're doing social events, that we need to be careful. Not everybody's loving 50s and 60s music like I did. Sometimes if I hear too much of that, I feel like I am in the home, as I will tell them. And I don't want to feel like I'm in a home. I want to continue to do new things. So I think there are different ways to grapple with it. But again, part of my move, luckily, has helped support some of those fears that you have when you do see people that go, that you can't replace them.
Right.
But you can find new outlets to share, although it's never the same. I mean, that's just the reality. What I have with you, I don't have with other people. There are connections that I think you can make that a little easier on you. The people never go away. I mean, I lost my friend Faye 3 years ago. I used to talk to her on a daily almost basis, particularly when she was ill. There are things around my house that remind me of her every day.
Okay.
So I never lose the people, the feeling I have for those people. They're in my heart. Right. I just can supplement some of the things I used to share with them with others, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. It does. I mean, I've had the benefit of pieces of this conversation with you over the years, but I know that I'm not alone, that there are other people out there who don't have a Linda that they can talk to. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast is because I feel incredibly blessed to have some wonderful people in my life who are just my lifeline. And I wanted to be able to share them with the world, whoever's listening. No, you may not have Linda as your personal friend, but you get a chance to just get a little glimpse of what I get in that relationship. And I'm hopeful that people will not let the dialogue, the thought process that we kind of initiate in something to talk about, that they won't let it die, that they'll continue these conversations with their own tribe, their own friends, or at least be inspired to go try to maybe use some of these tools to recreate, because I think you're right. I think you're never going to replace people, but maybe you can recreate an environment that supports you in some other way.
Right. And I think that's exactly what I'm trying to say. You won't replace them, but
one of the things that I so appreciate about your approach is that while for me sometimes this topic is emotional, you tend, at least from my vantage point, you tend to be warm, but also pragmatic. And when you're talking about transitioning into another stage of life, you can't stumble into that blinded by tears. You just can't. You've got to settle yourself down and, like you said, create that list so that realistically you know what it is you need next. And so you can go about the job of trying to build that or find that. I think a lot of times people are just so emotionally wrought that they can't see. And so then nothing happens other than a lot of feelings. And feelings don't usually help you solve anything.
I think you're right about that. And I think the other thing that holds us back, and I am pretty pragmatic, and sometimes we'll put things in their boxes to make it easier for me to make decisions, because I find that some people, friends of mine, are stuck. They're stuck in a place that they're comfortable in. So when they think about retiring, sometimes they tend to awfulize it, my made up word, but awfulize things. They think about, I won't have any friends, or I'm not going to have anything to do, or I won't have a purpose in my life. Those things are concerns that we all have, but I can either kind of get sucked up in those concerns, or I can step back away from it and say, what can I do about that? And that's kind of the approach I took. It was, I don't want to be unhappy. I don't want to be sad about this. So what can I do that's going to make me feel better? And that is a lot of how I ended up here. Because I just had to, those lists kind of helped me get out. And again, I wasn't really in the hole, but I've seen my friends and I've told them, I said, just see if you can make a list and decide what it is you want. We also have a tendency, because as particularly mothers, but men too, you get tied to things, whether that's your kids or your house or your things, and it's hard to let go of them. So again, you have to decide, what is it I'm going to take with me that's going to remind me of this wonderful life I had, but let me finish it out in a good way. And I guess that's the other part of it, is just as a goal. Like I said, I'm on the downhill slope of my life. I know that. I'm very aware of it. So I look at every day as a blessing. And it's, what can I do today that's going to let me kind of enjoy the thrill of that downhill slope? Because otherwise, I'm kind of rolling down the hill into my grave, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to go that way.
It's interesting. While you were talking, it just struck me, and I'd never had this thought before. But when I worked for you, you ran a sales organization, and sales always has its challenges, but you were always very calm and mindful of what the end goal was going to be and how the shift needed to happen to be able to achieve that. And that was something that you were able to instill in the people that reported to you, which is why they were successful as well. But you were not, unlike some of the management that I supported, you were not hyperventilating at every moment. It was not frantic, just buzzsaw. You didn't ever approach it that way. And those same tools, those same skills that you honed to precision, actually, in management, you've brought into your personal life. And I wonder if other people even think like that, because I think most of us, if you've been even mildly successful in your life, you've learned how to manage something for yourself fairly well. If you look at those same skills to help move into this next phase.
I'm sure I did. And those years, honestly, at Wang, ended up going into a very tumultuous period for me. So I as a parent, had to keep my head about me and get her done, as they say, get it done.
Yep.
And maybe that compartmentalization did help me get through what I was doing at work. I also, the other thing is I felt I had a vision role, and as you helped me with, setting some clear expectations and rules that actually could be consistent, taught me a lot in that job as well. And I think some of those things I did bring forward. There was also personal stuff that I went through at that time, which forced me to look at myself and how I do react to things. So coming to deal with my own flaws and issues have also changed my attitude toward life and toward retirement and how I want to spend the rest of my life, which is why I feel that although I know what it can be like to be depressed and overwhelmed, let me just put it that way, sometimes it's the circumstance. Sometimes it's us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so figuring that out is a very personal and individual thing. But again, I sought out groups that could help me through that.
Yep.
And I encourage people to do that, because taking a look at yourself and your own flaws is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Because it's hard to admit what we're not good at. It's much easier to think we're good at lots of things and just because I did that thing at Wang, yay, Linda. But there were lots of flaws that I had too. Luckily, they did not come out in that job, but they could have, I suppose. I don't know. Maybe it's just the other thing I really believe in my heart is, as I told my grandson, we're supposed to keep learning all our life.
Yep.
The time God gives us on this earth is one learning opportunity after the other. And I didn't always believe that, but I absolutely believe it now. And I don't want to stop learning till I die. And I'm just going to take advantage of learning opportunities and growing opportunities for as long as I can.
It's interesting that you would say that, because I just in this session, and you and I have had many, but just in talking to you today, I'm realizing that throughout life, the experiences that we have, which we may not see as being relevant to this or that specifically, all are kind of ways to, as my father would say, add yet another tool to your tool bag. And so,
Yep.
as you get older, you find that instead of just having a hammer, you now have a hammer and a screwdriver and a wrench and a saw and, you know what I mean, a tape measure and a lot of other tools that you can use. And I think that, at least for me, I instead of resisting it, I went through part of my life preparing to expand. Oh, I'm going to go to school, and then I'm going to get a job, and then I'm going to grow my career, and then I'm going to this, and then I'm going to that. And then you get to a point where you're not really growing in that same way. And the growth takes place in terms of self-understanding, developing stronger relationships with your friends. And I think for me, where I got stuck was the shift. It's not that you stop learning, it's the kinds of things you're learning now. And the expectation that you will be using, you've amassed some skills. Now it's time for you to employ those skills as you're living your life, not just as you're doing your job. And that was a shift that was difficult. Actually, today's conversation is helping me see that, because you get to that point and then it's like, okay, so what am I supposed to be doing now? Am I supposed to be stopping? I don't want to stop. I don't want, unlike you, maybe just like you, I didn't want to do what I had been doing for a living anymore, but I still wanted to make a contribution. And it was like, well, what does that look like? And I was having people say, no, you're not supposed to do that. It's time for you to go sit on the porch and drink sweet tea and kick up your heels. And I was like, that doesn't look like fun to me. I don't want to do that. I want to do something else. And so I've created a different kind of community than you have. I haven't moved into a senior community, but I've created a new environment for myself, made up of, I call them my patchwork people, a few folks from the past and a few folks from the present, and some folks that weren't friends but were proteges, but now they've developed a little bit, and now I'm adding them to the mix a little bit, and it's just a quilt of people that I've gathered in. But knowing how to look at that and how to assess what your needs are and figure out how you're going to address them was really the challenge. And I think a lot of that for me was more inadvertent than it was deliberate. And I'm hopeful that folks who are listening into this show can learn from your wisdom, because I do all the time, that maybe you don't have to stumble into it. Maybe you can stop for a second and map out a plan. How novel is that?
So when you say that, I mean, some of mine was circumstance. I mean, it wasn't all planned, and that's
Uh,
okay because life isn't all planned.
no, but
But when you find yourself, I guess my thing is when you find yourself against the wall, what do you do about it? And like you pivoted and did your own new business. Um, when when the job came to an end that I had, I just didn't want to do it anymore. I mean, it was really very, I just, I could have picked up and looked for another job. I just didn't want to. I
right.
really was tired and I recognized that I just didn't love it anymore. And you and I talked a lot about, do I want to start my own business? And I thought, ugh, I don't really want to do that either.
Right.
So it wasn't all planned. I just had to look at my options and figure out what fit me best. That's really what it came down to.
Okay,
And then
so
I
like
made
a
a plan.
self-assessment, and then kind
Yeah,
of evaluation. But
because I don't think you can see anything clearly if you can't figure out where you are. I used to say business wise, if you can't admit your faults, if you can't recognize the things that aren't working, how do you fix them? So you have to live a little bit in the what's not working to figure out what it is that might work for you.
right.
And life's not a guarantee. So it might not, I mean, I could have moved down here and felt very isolated. That was a real possibility. Or
Wasn't it?
I could have had my kids boycott it, which is what Catherine said she was going to do. I'm not going to go down to Fredericksburg. And then she ended up living with me for 4 years. So, hey, not everything was planned.
Well, that's true. That's true. But I know you, and I know that it could never have not worked ultimately. You would have figured out a way, because that's who you are. You would have figured out a way to make it work. Even if you had to abandon your original plan and move to another one, I know you would never have just sat in, this is a disaster and there's nothing I can do about it. That's just not who you are.
Right. Well, that's not who I am now. Because again, I'm going to say I sat in a disaster for a while. And it's when I lost myself where I couldn't. And that's why I say it's easy. People should not feel bad because they're kind of lost in where they are. It happens to many of us.
Okay.
Um, the question is finding a support system or a therapist or a friend or something that can help you work through those things. And in my case, take a look at myself. But I think that's true in a lot of people because it's a hard thing to do.
Right.
So in some ways, and I say this all the time, but the hard time that I went through actually was a blessing. It did not it did not seem like a blessing at the time, let me assure you. But because it forced me to look at myself, it changed my attitude from being on the verge of full depression to looking at life totally different. And when things go bad in my life now, it's really just an opportunity for me to change. I got to
Okay.
look at it differently.
Okay.
So that's why I think, to your point, I'm not willing to sit and do nothing about it. I will do something. I don't know what it will be, but that's okay. I'm
You'll figure
okay
it
with
out.
that.
Yeah, you'll figure it out.
Yeah. Because I don't have it. If I really look at it, I don't really have a choice.
Yeah, you
Either I'm going
do.
to live depressed or I'm going to fix it.
But that is a choice. And I think a
Exactly.
lot of times people
Don't recognize the
don't
choice.
recognize the choice and end up living in depression because they feel they don't have a choice. But that is a choice. To sit and do nothing is a choice.
Correct. And even in this community, I think you and I talked about it. I have some friends that I do pray for them because they're unfortunately kind of miserable in that they are isolating themselves in the midst of a place that's got hundreds of things going on. But, one lady who's just really sad about a husband that passed 10 years ago. And she's rationalized and justified that it's okay to stay in that place. That's when you need to look at yourself, because it's not your environment that's creating it. It's your own prison that you've created for yourself. And I'm not saying she shouldn't mourn the loss of her husband, but it's a choice whether you want to live there or not in that grief. So it's very personal. I mean, some people will not pull out of that, and I feel for them, but others will. They'll maybe take a look at themselves and go, okay, is that rationalizing where I am, or can I do something about it? And I mean, that's the new look at the end of life, like it is your best ski trip, and I don't ski, you've ever been on, and go out with as much adrenaline and thrill as you can.
No, I agree with you. And I think that one of the things that we've kind of touched on is the fact that aging is just another opportunity to have a personal perspective change of mind, if you will, just
Yeah,
another time to do a reassessment. I mean, I remember graduating from high school. You got all these paths that you can take. You can go professional right then, depending on what your interests are. You can go to college. You can get married. You can do there are all these doors, and you get to pick one. Sometimes you pick a couple, but you pick one and you decide you're going to walk through it. And I think that for me and for some of the people that I've talked to in the past, particularly at one point, I felt like the doors were gone. I didn't have any doors
right.
anymore. And so I've been one who always wanted to choose some exciting, daring door, right? And I thought, oh, everyone's telling me I can't do that now. Well, that's not true. I still see doors. And
Yep.
so I can choose to open one. And even if that doesn't work for you or anybody else, if it works for me, then I get to make another choice. And I
Yep.
think that what happens when we get older is there's so many tape recordings that are telling you your time for choosing a new door is over. You don't get to pick anything else. You just have to stay where you are because you're at the tail end of the whole ride. No more choices. I don't think that's true. And I think that that's really what this whole session today has said. We started off with you saying, I started out by making a list because I was good. I was creating a door for myself, right? And I needed to
Yep.
figure out which door I was going to pick and how I wanted to go through it and what that door needed to offer me in order for me to be happy.
Yep.
As opposed to here I sit in Arlington, I can't move because I'm not going to be working. I won't have any additional income. I don't know what that's going to look like. I'm just going to be miserable and stay here because I've been here. And
Right.
It doesn't have to be that way. And whether a person chooses to start a new business or
Yep.
to move to a senior compound, it's about another choice again. And instead of choosing to not make a choice, which is a choice, you can choose to move in whatever direction will work for you.
Yep. And look at all the opportunities that are available to you. I mean, the point you made too about as we get older, the life experiences we have, many of them, because as you grow older, you get responsibilities that you didn't have when you were younger, making those exciting choices. And some of those recordings get stuck in our head. And we believe that we know best.
Yes.
We've always done it this way. This is a good choice. I've learned about me that this is also an opportunity for you to maybe do some of those things you never could do while you were working.
True.
So maybe you want to paint. I'm not kidding you. I looked at maybe we need to go on a cruise ship because I love cruises and figure out, I said, Bill, maybe I can be the social director and you can perform. We just live on a ship forever.
Woo! That's a great idea, though.
There are people that do that. It's the world really and truly is your oyster at this point. Really think of something that's not just what you've always done and do something maybe different and exciting. I mean, now I rarely took vacation, let alone went off for a couple weeks. We have people here that go off for 6 months on a cruise, rent their house out, go on a cruise.
Wow.
I've got one that's doing a whole world cruise. They will be gone for a year.
Wow.
We're getting ready to go on one in October for 22 days. I mean, and I couldn't have done that unless I had gone through all those things and said, I don't want to be house poor, so let's get something that's in my budget. Let's do this. I can't do it every year like some people do, but the fact that I can do it once every 2 to 3 years is heaven to me.
Yep.
Heaven. So there are all kinds of things you can do if you don't let yourself get stuck. And that's hard, but possible.
Well, maybe that's kind of the message of this show is you do have choices and you can make them and you don't have to get stuck and figure out what you want to do next because it doesn't have to look like what you did before.
Right. And it doesn't have to look like all the scary things that we think about. It doesn't have to look like that.
No, true. It's interesting because I did start my own business and then I was like, oh, it's too much headache and I don't want to deal with all of this drama. It's like still being in corporate America. It's just that all of it's my responsibility now. And then one day, as I was watching social media, it dawned on me, I can do content. I love to talk to my friends. Why don't I just do that? And therein lies another, quote, business, if you will. There are just so many opportunities now that look different because of the technology that's out there, that you can be 85 years old and sitting in a wheelchair and still be a content developer. Listen, like you said, you can get a job on a cruise ship and one of you be the social director and the other one, be part of the entertainment package. And away you go for however long you want to be out there doing that. There's just options. But again, I think it all starts with recognizing that this is a new phase.
Yep.
There are now some different doors in front of you. Not that there aren't any. There are some. They're just different. And you've got to figure out what it is you want and pick one.
Right. And go get it.
Yep.
Just do it.
Well, I can't thank you enough for sharing some of your wisdom. I think this is going to be helpful to somebody who is sitting at home, listening to the radio, comes across this episode and realizes, wow, I've got choices I can make. And my choices don't have to look like Linda's or Lynn's. They can look like mine. But I do have an opportunity to kind of shift this thing. And so let me get started trying to do that.
Good.
And
I hope it leaves them hopeful.
I hope so too. And something to talk about with their friends.
Great.
Linda, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, as you always do with me. I mean, I feel truly blessed that what started out as a colleague relationship has turned into such a valuable friendship. I really appreciate you.
The feeling is mutual, and thank you for the opportunity.
Well, everybody, you will talk to us again next week on Something to Talk About.